So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first to thank the European Committee and the Subcommittee of Human Rights for the opportunity to participate in this panel. As a former school teacher myself from Brazil, as an immigrant and mother of European citizens, development education is very central also in my personal and educational agenda. As has been mentioned before, I hold the only professorial chair in global education in Europe, and I see this with great responsibility. So I'm going to be using my briefing notes quite a lot in this presentation, so that's I'm going to be referring to things that are in the briefing notes that are not in the presentation, so I'd like to invite you to have a look at those if you have access to them. So in the wake of the shootings in Oulu and the riots in England, it is of paramount importance to conceptualize education as a means to equip people to participate together as global active citizens in a complex, diverse, uncertain, and unequal global society. Providing safeguards against dogmatisms and fundamentalisms that may lead to confusion, disenchantment with formal political processes, and increased violence. In this sense, development education is central to human development in a context of global interdependence and security. On the other hand, in the context of knowledge societies, development education needs to recognize the shifting profile of learners, learning, knowledge, and societies themselves, and offer appropriate pedagogical responses that support learners to develop global-mindedness through critical and transnational literacies that can help them engage with the assumptions and implications of multiple viewpoints and empower them to shape and exercise their agency in informed and ethical ways. So in relation to challenges for a DEAR strategy, I would like to make some points in relation to three dimensions. Number one, the dimension of harmonizing DEAR policies in Europe. Number two, the need to strengthen commitment to ethical internationalism and development solidarity and make it the focus of development education, and the need to strengthen support for teacher education. So in terms of harmonizing DEAR policies in Europe, it's important to celebrate the progress so far. There's a multi-stakeholder process, or processes, that have been quite successful to date, that have been funded by the Commission. There's unprecedented forward-looking policy making, and here I cite Portugal, the Czech Republic, Poland, and Finland also. There's a need to see policy making as an ongoing and responsive dialogue. When we arrive at consensus in policy making, it's important to see consensus as a provisional consensus and not close down the possibility for further dialogue in the field as the context changes. It's important to engage with different development paradigms in historical debates, and I'm going to go back to that briefly at the end of my presentation. And there's a need to recognize divergent conceptualizations of development education in connections with intercultural education. In the briefing, I have quoted from a report called the DE Watch report, which was available for people at the front desk. And here you have several definitions of development education as awareness raising, global education, and life skills. And the report says specifically that public relations is not development education. It's important to remember that. So in order to give you a bit of a briefing of where I'm coming from, my own definition of development education conceptualizes development education as the interface between the self, the other, and the world. And in this interface, you have perceptions, relationships, and flows that need to be understood and engaged with in education. And this happens in the context of globalization, which I conceptualize as advanced capitalism, vast international migration, ecological fragility, technological interconnectivity, cultural hybridity, and reconfiguration of political power. So global education and development education would be at the center of that. And this kind of education, global education, is related to different strands of education that we have seen to proliferating in the educational field. such as education about sustainability, human rights, development, peace education in relation to local and global contexts, education about ethics, intercultural and multicultural education, and education about identity, culture, power, privilege, and global citizenship. Now, in terms of what kinds of competencies and skills lie in the middle of these three circles, I've been working with the concept of global-mindedness with the mobility Simo, the Finnish agency that organizes mobility in Finland. And we have been developing together an idea of global-mindedness as competencies that are important for the engagement of learners with complexity, uncertainty, diversity, and inequality. So the engagement with complexity involves the awareness of global processes, relationships, and dynamics, perceptual acuity, local global relationships, capacity to deal with ambiguity and open-endedness, as well as contingency and provisionality. Engagements with uncertainty would encompass resilience, rebound ability, ability to cope with difficulty, capacity to reflect on the unfamiliar, flexibility, open-mindedness, reflection, and reflexivity. Engagements with diversity are about perspective awareness, willingness to work with different perspectives, open-mindedness, flexibility, respecting the right of others to hold contradictory views, questioning of assumptions, knowledge of knowledge production. And engagements with inequality would encompass human choices, historical processes, interdependence, civic participation, self-implication, roots of inequality, social responsibility, responsible choices, and awareness of knowledge power production. Now, in relation to diversity and inequality, I'd like to invite you to do an exercise with me that shows the generally untalked about problems in this area. And this is an exercise I generally do in conferences or with students. So I ask people generally to imagine a field of corn cobs, harvest their corn cobs, take the husks out, and place them in front of them. And then I ask them if their corn cobs look like this. So these are real corn cobs in Latin America, but generally what people say is that their corn cobs look like yellow corn cobs that we see in the supermarkets. I generally use this metaphor to illustrate the need first to engage with issues of hegemony and ethnocentrism in global education. And that takes me to the link with intercultural education and the need to talk about ethical internationalism and development solidarity. So in terms of ethical internationalism and development solidarity, I would like to propose a focus on global ethics beyond ethnocentric, ahistorical, and paternalistic approaches towards a focus on reciprocity and mutuality of learning in development awareness and cooperation. Moving beyond ideas of self-interested interdependence based on paternalistic ideas of help, assistance, or charity, towards development as a recognition of the dignity and contribution of every human being, about development education then being about human responsibility and human possibility. And development education in the South, so I'd like to propose a focus on that as well, and the need for more dialogue, partnerships, and coordinated efforts. And in that sense, I quote from Professor Hari Garuba from the University of Cape Town, who asks us in development cooperation, are we simply as corporations and institutions setting up shops and workshops in the African countries we deal with, or are we committed to a dialogic engagement that deepens ties and fosters genuine knowledge creation and collaboration? And lastly, in terms of teacher education, I would like to cite the Finnish example. This is an MA level course for teacher education that I coordinate in Oulu, which focuses on intercultural teacher education. And I think it's one of the few teacher education programs that actually has a specific focus on that. And our curriculum is based on the idea of global-mindedness, global education. There's a very strong focus on ethics. We concentrate on social, cultural, and historical, local and global analysis, north, south, east, west dialogue, globalization from above and from below. So we look at social movements, new social movements, and events like the World Social Forum. We're thinking about a new pedagogical DNA of 21st century competencies that go beyond the idea of transmission of information towards ethical choices and equipping people to live together as global citizens. We've also focused on mobility and internationalization, and we have a strong focus on research-based teacher education, teachers as researchers and teaching based on research. So there's, again, the importance of theoretically and empirically sound methodologies that address common ethnocentric ideas of development. So there's a need for more research support in that area. There's also a very strong emphasis in this program on cross-sectoral support, cross-sectoral partnerships that support multi-stakeholder processes, actually, and that involve our student teachers with the wider society and in actors in development education.
Sorry, could you?
So that's the last slide, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you.